Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. So we will continue our lesson to process costing. Okay, last time we have learned on the process costing flow, where the process 1, the input in the process 1 will be the output in the process 2, and the input in the process 2 will be the output in the process 3. And finally, this will be as a finished goods. Okay, so the previous lessons we already learned on the features of the process costing, the losses, the type of losses, which is the normal loss, abnormal loss, and the abnormal gain. So today we'll continue on the concept of the work in progress, where in the work in progress, usually there will be the opening work in progress and the closing work in progress, and we'll also calculate the equivalent units, which equals to the degree of completions of the work in progress. And the computation of the cost of equivalent unit is when there is an opening work in progress. So we are using the method of valuation, first in, first out, FIFO, and the weighted average cost method, WAM. So, and finally, we'll calculate the cost per unit of the finished goods. And also we are preparing the process account and the respective losses account, the abnormal loss, loss account, and normal loss account, and the abnormal gain account. Okay, so what is the equivalent units? So when there is a partially completed units on hand, or which is known as a work in progress at the beginning or end of the period, which is the opening and closing work in progress, so we need to change the way we allocate the production cost. So the production cost now will relate to the units that are started in the previous period, which is the opening work in progress, and completed in the current period, started and completed during the period, which is known as the completed productions of the current period, and the incomplete at the end of the period, which is the ending work in process or the closing work in progress. So equivalent units is actually the notional whole units that represent the incomplete work. So these equivalent units must be calculated as per the degree of completion of the work in progress in respective of the opening work in progress or the closing work in progress. So we need to have the equivalent units to apportion costs between the work in progress and the fully completed units. So we need to differentiate or separate the work in progress, which comes from the opening OWIP and closing CWIP, as well as the fully completed units, the finished goods. So here the normal losses are considered to be as a 0 equivalent units, and the opening units and the closing units, opening work in progress and closing work in progress, need to measure and compute the cost correctly. Okay, so the process account when there is opening work in progress. So there are two methods that commonly used to calculate the value of work in progress, whether it's a OWIP or CWIP, which is the FIFO method and average method. So for the FIFO method, first in, first out, so we are assumed that the opening work in progress is processed and completed first during the current period. So that means the production will use all this opening work in progress in their production. Then the added material will included to complete for the current process. So the cost per unit is based on the current period cost and the current period production. Okay, so the cost of opening work in progress, OWIP, brought forward. So OWIP brought forward is added separately to completed productions. So closing work in progress arises only from the new unit started in the current period, because the opening work in progress already assumed has been completed in that following process, and whatever left is the uncompleted considered as the closing work in progress. So there are two categories. First is the OWIP, completed during the current period. So this is OWIP brought forward, and the units that completely processed, started and completed during the current period, which is known as a CPDP. CPDP, which is completed production during the period. CPDP, completed production during the period. Okay. So next will be what is the previous process cost. In the process costing, the output of one process will become the input of the following process, and this becomes the previous process cost. So the output of one process will become the input of the process, the next process. Okay, for example, the output of process 1 will become the input in the process 2. So the input in the process 2 is known as the previous process cost, or PPC. So additional materials may be added to this transferred material from the previous cost. So the previous process material will be fully completed before it is being transferred to the next process. So for the weighted average cost method, the costs brought forward in the OWIP, opening work in progress, and the current period costs are added. So it will be added together, and finding the cost per unit by dividing the total cost with the number of units produced in the current period. So there is no distinction between the opening work in progress and the units completely produced during the current period, or the CPDP. So there is no distinctions, OWIP and the CPDP, because everything we are assumed as value as a weighted average method valuation. Okay, so the choice between first in first out or weighted average method is using the first in first out when opening work in progress is given with the degree of completions and the total cost brought forward is given. So if there is no information about that total cost brought forward, so better to use the weighted average method. Okay, when the opening work in progress has the value of each cost element, but there is no degree of completion for each element. Means the element of transfer from the previous cost, conversion cost, or the added material. There is no information about that in terms of the total cost brought forward in respect to the opening work in progress. Okay, there is no degree of completions. We do not know to what extent that this equivalent units is completed in respect to the previous cost, in respect to the direct material as well as the conversion cost. In that case, using the weighted average method. If we know the degree of completion and the opening work in progress is given with the costs brought forward, respective costs for the PPC, previous process cost for the direct material, and for the conversion cost, so then better using first in first out method. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much for your listening.